Councilmember Sonic.
Yeah, I just have a quick question regarding taking over the police work for Falcon Heights in January. I know the county's done this with other cities in the region. What is the biggest kind of positive or negative impact you see when the county takes that over for a city?
Well, you know, we haven't had an additional community for quite a few years.
Okay.
So, you know, to try to say, I couldn't give you a lot of historical knowledge of that. Probably the last time we did this was been either Arden Hills or White Bear Township. It'd been one or the other. I think actually it had been White Bear Township. The biggest thing for us at that time, they had some constables still working for the community, and then so it was working on the details of integrating those folks into the staff. The other big concern it is for any community, and certainly is for Falcon Heights, is what is our level of service going to be? Right. And so we have to kind of lay out that architecture for the city. In the case of Falcon Heights, they've already had contract law enforcement services. Historically, going back to the late '80s, it was the sheriff's office. Then for a few years, it was Roseville PD, and then for about the last 20, it has been St. Anthony PD. So at least they haven't been averse or haven't been familiar with that kind of service. So even in our case, but we have to talk about what are the levels of service and how does that work into the financial equation with the other contract communities, and there's baseline levels of service, and then depending on what kind of amenities a community wants or needs, there can be some additional costs that get factored into that equation. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is just trying to give them that information, make sure they've got it, understand what the levels of service are, which I'd put our level of service up there with anybody, but nonetheless, it's certainly a concern. I get it, why it would be.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Steve, I do still have one line of questions that I think I asked Kevin to pass on to Jack to make sure that you were prepared. The Falcon Heights contract.
Yes.
My primary concern about the Falcon Heights scenario is where the backup cars are going to come from. And logistically, usually contiguous communities it's easy to back each other up. We're going into new ground here by only having one car in Falcon Heights, and if they need additional assistance. And because of the politics of St. Anthony, I'm suspecting that they won't be eager to run into Falcon Heights. Maybe they wouldn't even be wanted. I'm not even sure what the politics of that are. St. Paul's on a different radio frequency, which really brings it back to Roseville, who is the logical agency to help out your squads there. But I'm concerned about the likelihood that the contract city cars in the 7 contract cities, I guess 6 now if you eliminate Gem Lake, from Arden Hills, Shoreview, and Vadnais Heights might be called for either an emergency backup of some sort or just a backup for transportation, arrests, searches, whatever that might be. And I know you're familiar with this, and I'm sure you've thought through, but as the mayor of Vadnais Heights, I just need some assurances that our squads aren't going to be pulled away unnecessarily. Because the odds of the Falcon Heights car ever running up to help Vadnais or Arden Hills or Shoreview are pretty much nil, because they're not going to leave their city unattended since there's only one car there. But the odds and the likelihood that they will need a backup from somewhere is pretty great. So as you've thought through those things, it's a 2.5-mile emergency stretch from County Road D down to Roselawn. It's probably a little longer from Vadnais. I mean, that raises some additional risk. Are you comfortable that we're going to be able to provide backup in a safe way and also a way that doesn't negatively impact the other contract cities?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. We also share some of those concerns, and they are built into some of the staffing plans that we're looking at. Contiguous cities are easier to back and share resources across. There are some gaps in the schedule, and there will be some times. They're in the early morning hours, in the middle of the night into the early morning hours. There are also some overlap hours where there will be actually 2 Falcon Heights cars working. With that being said, we've looked at some of the modeling of how far a Vadnais Heights car might go or drive to assist in White Bear Township. And you might have from the center of the city here to White Bear Township a 7 to 8.5 mile run to get to that other incident. Similar stats down into Falcon Heights, you're looking at 8.5 to 10 miles. So you are adding some time and distance onto that. The thought would be that the partnering cities who we've all spoken with, and there are 2 sides of the coin with the St. Anthony issues on that. I think our primary backup with them being a Hennepin County department primarily will come from the Roseville, the St. Paul, the county wide cars that aren't assigned to a city as a backup, and our partners in St. Paul. So, knowing all of those things are going on, one of the things, there are 2 different radio frequencies going on when you get into the St. Paul over to the county channels, but with the merged comm center, that gets a little less complicated nowadays than it used to be. It is our goal to keep your resources as unchanged as possible with this addition and not find that the services you pay so dearly and see so preciously here aren't someplace else inordinately amount of time.
I guess I have 2 things to ask, though, just as we move forward. If you could follow up to make sure that the comm center dispatches those priority 2 or 3 calls on St. Paul's frequency, so that if there is an emergency call in Falcon Heights, St. Paul knows about it, because you know how that goes.
Yes.
Unless you really kind of give them instructions, because there quite often will be a car in Como Park or somewhere in that area that could run up Lexington or Hamlin and Snelling, and it's a quick trip from University and Snelling up to Larpenteur, really, compared to where you might be coming from. That would give me some more comfort. And then if it's possible that we could keep a track of how many times a car from the contract cities is sent into Falcon Heights, I don't think that's terribly difficult. I mean, and the reverse as well, which I don't think is going to happen often. But it would be nice to know by the end of next year, midway through next year, how that's looking in terms of, our cars being pulled in. And finally, just the last thing on the resource issue. I know you said the jail will be up to staff by December 2nd. I think that's great. I guess we read a lot about what's happening. But my understanding is there's going to be another 6.5 deputies necessary for Falcon Heights. Is that the figure that we arrived at, 6.4?
That's the number for 24-hour coverage.
24-hour coverage. Are you comfortable, or can we count on you being at full staffing regarding the deputies as well on January 1st, so that the immediate implementation of Falcon Heights isn't going to mean we're running short in the contract cities?
Great question. And yes, we had last 3 days we spent in negotiations over new staffing models and schedules and things like that in the ADC with the Teamsters local. We've made great headway on that. That deal will get publicized at some point when it's inked and done. Part of that is also there are right now deputies hired for Falcon Heights working, filling in the ADC, that at some point in the very near future, once that other talks I just mentioned are finalized, will be pulled out and they will be put into other slots, which will forward the 6.5 deputies, 7 deputies to PSSD. We will guarantee you we will be fully staffed on January 1st when the light goes on. That will happen.
That's the words we needed to hear.
That will happen.
Thank you.